This is a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington. President Trump is about to make an announcement in the White House Rose Garden. He is expected to take questions. Now, this comes in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, which has killed more than 136,000 Americans. Earlier today, President Trump spoke exclusively with CBS's Catherine Herridge, and here's some of that interview.
President Trump, back in 2015, you said the Confederate battle flag belongs in a museum. Do you still believe that?
All I say is freedom of speech. It's very simple. My attitude is freedom of speech. Very strong views on the Confederate flag. With me, it's freedom of speech. Very simple. Like it, don't like it, it's freedom of speech.
Would you be comfortable with your supporters displaying the Confederate battle flag at political events?
You know, it depends on what your definition is, but I am comfortable with freedom of speech. It's very simple.
But you understand why the flag is a painful symbol for many people, because it's a reminder of slavery.
Well, people love it, and I know people that like the Confederate flag, and they're not thinking about slavery. I look at NASCAR. You go to NASCAR, you had those flags all over the place. They stopped it. I just think it's freedom of speech, whether it's Confederate flags or Black Lives Matter or anything else you want to talk about. It's freedom of speech.
Let's talk about George Floyd. You said George Floyd's death was a terrible thing.
Terrible.
Why are African Americans still dying at the hands of law enforcement in this country?
And so are white people. So are white people. What a terrible question to ask. So are white people. More white people, by the way. More white people.
That was the president a short time ago, as blacks are disproportionately killed more by police than whites. Paula Reed is at the White House at this hour. And Paula, do we know why the president is holding this announcement in the Rose Garden at this hour?
We know he wants to make, Norah, some sort of announcement around China, perhaps something related to Hong Kong and or the coronavirus. But at this point, we really don't know. It's also, of course, unusual to host a Rose Garden press conference on the same day that you have a big network interview. But as we heard there, our colleague Catherine Herridge asking the president about how police officers disproportionately use deadly force against black Americans. While the president noted there that white Americans are also killed by police, the fact is that, yes, more white people are killed by police, but black people are still 2.5 times more likely to die in an encounter with police. And there the president didn't really have an answer on how his administration is addressing that disparity.
The president also making some news when it comes to wearing masks and testing with COVID. What have we learned?
That's right. In this interview, he also talked about his stance on masks. He continues to defend the U.S.'s testing system, even though just yesterday, his former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, said his own family wasn't even able to get tests. He said that at this point in the pandemic, that delay is inexcusable. And at this point, Norah, it's not clear if the administration has a plan to make testing more rapidly available. Right now, Quest Diagnostics says the average wait to get your test results is 7 days. And as Mick Mulvaney said, at this point, that is inexcusable and really renders a lot of these tests useless.
And as we wait for the president to enter the Rose Garden there, it is 90 degrees here in Washington. And in fact, going for a historic heat strike, actually, here in Washington. Very hot, as you could see. Even the president in his interview earlier today appeared quite warm, visibly warm, as it is very hot here in the nation's capital. And Paula, talk about what has been the status of the president and his relationship with Dr. Anthony Fauci, as there's so much attention on the coronavirus task force and the record in terms of establishing guidelines for the American public.
Exactly. This week, the tension between the president and Dr. Anthony Fauci, who has not been afraid to come out and contradict the president throughout this response, has really come to a head. Now it appears that several top White House officials are authorized to come out and directly attack Dr. Fauci. For example, the president's top trade advisor, Peter Navarro, came out and said that he believes that Dr. Fauci has been wrong on just about everything the two men have discussed. We also saw other task force members come out over the past few days and point out how Dr. Fauci has not always been right. Now, the president insisted yesterday, Norah, that the two men have a good relationship. While they don't always agree, he says he likes Dr. Fauci. But clearly, people within this administration feel that they are safe and they are protected commit if they go out and attack the nation's top medical expert in this way. And we have to remember, yes, Dr. Fauci has been wrong about a few things, but so has Dr. Birx, so has Secretary Azar, and of course, so has President Trump, who has repeatedly suggested that this virus would disappear. It does appear, though, here in the West Wing, and talking to my sources, Nora, the knives are out for Dr. Fauci, though he still, of course, has his career position in the government and his critical position on the task force.
Truly remarkable as the Society for Infectious Diseases and a number of doctors and public health officials have flocked to Dr. Fauci's defense, saying that this is unprecedented, the attack on public health officials. It also comes at a time that Dr. Fauci is leading up the search for a vaccine, a race for the cure. I actually spoke, Paula Reed, today with Dr. Francis Collins, who is the head of the National Institutes of Health, who told me that in the next 2 weeks, July 27th, is actually when they are actually going to begin the human trials for the vaccines. They want some 120,000 volunteers. So this is a critical time for people at the NIH to all be on the same page, working together as America searches and waits for a vaccine. Paula, also want to get your take on some of the other news today coming out of the White House. When major universities like Harvard, for instance, announced that they would only be holding online classes in the fall, Immigration and the White House said that means that no students with foreign visas would be able to come to the United States and live here and attend those online classes. I understand the White House has reversed itself today.
The White House is softening its stance on this. Of course, some of those universities, Nora, as you saw, they found sort of creative ways to get around this. In fact, in some instances, making up one-credit courses where you had to come in person because they were trying to push back against what was the administration's clear effort to restrict even legal immigration. The president also went so far as to suggest that he would restrict some federal funds to universities if they did not fully comply with his push to reopen in the fall. But again, the sort of walking back a little bit on these restrictions, it's what we've seen consistently throughout this pandemic, Nora, which are mixed messages coming from this White House. It has proved challenging for them to sort of go behind closed doors, come up with policies, come up with recommendations, and come out with a united front. Instead, you have the CDC saying one thing, the president saying something different, Dr. Fauci saying something different entirely. And it's ultimately costing lives. The mixed messages and this whole do as I say, not as I do on handshaking, on social distancing, on holding large indoor events, nor that's really been the consistent theme over the past 6 months. It'll be very interesting right now to see what the president says in the Rose Garden about China and about how he is going to fix this going forward, not just testing, but overall being more consistent in giving the country a plan to move forward to combat COVID and reopen the economy. As you know, one of his best chances for re-election is some sort of economic boost. And right now, there does not appear to be a clear path to help the country get through COVID and get the economy back on track.
We're also hearing from the CDC director, Robert Redfield, today, warning that the fall and winter will be one of the most difficult times in America. Dr. Redfield also saying that President Trump should, quote, set an example by wearing a mask, as he warned about this upcoming convergence of the flu in the fall. Paula, we did see the president for the first time over the weekend wear a mask, correct?
That's right. That's one of the first times we have seen him intentionally in front of pool cameras wearing a mask. There was at least one other instance where someone caught them when he was behind the scenes wearing a mask, and he has been reluctant to wear one. He's been repeatedly pressed by reporters on this. At first, he said he didn't need to wear one because he was tested and the people around him are tested. But Nora, as you know, when he goes on these trips to other states, you don't necessarily know if everyone you come in contact with has been tested and if that test is accurate, because as we know, these are not 100% foolproof. So it was notable, it was significant to see the president in that mask. He has said that he believes he looks like the, quote, Lone Ranger in that mask. He doesn't really mind it, but many other people are saying it's too little too late, and he should have been wearing that mask a long time ago, at the exact moment when this administration realized that wearing masks could really reduce the spread of this virus across the U.S.
We're going to bring you these live remarks from the President of the United States in the Rose Garden in just a moment, where he is also expected to take questions. We just got another 5-minute warning, so that will come shortly. The Director Redfield also saying that masking is not a political issue. It is a public health issue, and that if everyone wore a mask for the next 4 to 6 weeks, it would drive this coronavirus epidemic into the ground. I'm paraphrasing his words there. Paul, I also want to play a short clip from the interview with CBS News' Catherine Herridge a short time ago with the president talking about the return to school. Let's listen.
The Los Angeles School District is the latest and one of the largest in the country to say they're not going back to school in the fall.
Mistake.
What do you tell parents and teachers who feel that it's unsafe to go back?
I would tell parents and teachers that you should find yourself a new person, whoever's in charge of that decision, because it's a terrible decision. Because children and parents are dying from that trauma, too. They're dying because they can't do what they're doing. Mothers can't go to work because all of a sudden they have to stay home and watch their child, and fathers. What's happening? You know, there's a tremendous strain on that whole side of the equation.
So it's a balancing act.
It is a balancing act, but that we have to open our schools. Well, I also say a decision like that is politics, because we're starting to do very well in the polls, because I'm for law and order. I'm for strong business. Our jobs are coming back at a record level like never. We've never seen anything like it, record level. We're heading up. It's turning out to be the V, just like I built it once before, the strongest economy ever. I'm doing it again. And they don't want that to happen because they think—
Who's the they?
They is the Democrats.
And there you hear it, the President of the United States placing some blame there, clearly weighing on that. We should also note, Paula, that Dr. Fauci did say today we should try as hard as possible to get kids back into school. But it is, of course, a county by county, city by city, state by state issue. Is a state like Wyoming and Montana is not experiencing the same thing that Miami-Dade County is experiencing when it comes to that. And they need guidelines. Teachers want guidelines. Paula?
Absolutely. It's such a great point, because throughout this response, the administration has really deferred to local officials to assess their own situation on the ground and really make most of the decisions about reopening the economy. So it was somewhat of a surprise when the administration came out so hard last week, insisting that every school must reopen. The president saying he would directly apply pressure on governors, potentially even cut funding, though, of course, most schools are locally or privately funded. And the question is why? When talking to my sources inside the White House, I am told that the president knows in order to get folks back to work, especially parents, you need to get kids back to class. So in many ways, the president sees this as essential in getting the economic boost he needs ahead of November to perhaps propel him to re-election. But Nora, even the president's own medical experts, Dr. Birx, Dr. Redfield, say we really don't have that much data on how this virus impacts children under 10. All
right, and now we see the President of the United States in the Rose Garden to make this announcement. Let's listen in.
Thank you very much, everybody. Please. Hope it's not too hot, but it's pretty warm. Thank you. So, we've had a big day in the stock market. Things are coming back, and they're coming back very rapidly, a lot sooner than people thought. People are feeling good about our country. People are feeling good about therapeutics and possible vaccines. But we're going to go over quite a bit, and maybe at the end we'll take some questions if we have time. It's not too hot. Today I signed legislation and an executive order to hold China accountable for its oppressive actions against the people of Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Autonomy Act, which I signed this afternoon, passed unanimously through Congress. This law gives my administration powerful new tools to hold responsible the individuals and the entities involved in extinguishing Hong Kong's freedom. We've all watched what happened. Not a good situation. Their freedom's been taken away, their rights have been taken away, and with it goes Hong Kong, in my opinion, because it will no longer be able to compete with free markets. A lot of people will be leaving Hong Kong, I suspect. And we're going to do a lot more business because of it, because we just lost one competitor. It's the way it is. We lost a very, very serious competitor that we incentivized to take a lot of business and do well. And we gave them a lot of business by doing what we did. We gave them things that nobody else had the right to do. and that gave them a big edge over other markets. And because of that edge, they've done really historic business, tremendous business, far bigger than anybody would have thought years ago when we did this gift. It was really a gift to freedom. Today, I also signed an executive order ending U.S. preferential treatment for Hong Kong. Hong Kong will now be treated the same as mainland China. No special privileges, no special economic treatment, and no export of sensitive technologies. In addition to that, as you know, we're placing massive tariffs and have placed very large tariffs on China. First time that's ever happened to China. Billions of dollars have been paid to the United States, of which I've given quite a bit to the farmers and ranchers of our country because they were targeted. And that's been going on for 3 years. It's the first time anybody's ever done anything like that. And prior to the plague pouring in from China, they were having the worst year, as you know, in 67 years. And I don't want them to have a bad year. I want them to have a good year. But they were taking advantage of the United States for many, many years. And that's stopping. But then the virus came in, and the world is a different place. But we're now getting back. And one of the reasons the market's doing so, it's almost at the point that it was at prior to the plague. Almost. We're getting very close. It's a great thing. It's an amazing thing what our people have done and what they've endured. No administration has been tougher on China than this administration. We imposed historic tariffs. We stood up to China's intellectual property theft at a level that nobody's ever come close. We confronted untrustworthy Chinese technology and telecom providers. We convinced many countries, and I did this myself for the most part, not to use Huawei because we think it's an unsafe security risk. It's a big security risk. I talked many countries out of using it. If they want to do business with us, they can't use it. Just today, I believe that UK announced that they're not going to be using it. And that was up in the air for a long time, but they've decided. And you look at Italy, you look at many other countries. We withdrew from the Chinese-dominated WHO, and we fully rebuilt the United States military. The WHO, World Health Organization, we were paying close to $500 million a year. China was paying $39 million a year. And China had too much say. They worked it very hard, which is a bad thing done by our past administrations, but we were tough, and we were saying, I was asking, I said, why are we paying so much more than China? China has 1.4 billion people. We have 325, probably 325 million approximately. Nobody can give the exact count. We're trying to get an exact count, but you have, over the years, many illegals who have come into the country, so it depends on how you want to count it. But you could say 325 to 350 million people as opposed to 1.4 billion people. And the world trade is terrible. That deal is terrible. The World Health is a terrible deal. We've been very tough on the World Trade Organization, and we've been, I guess, as tough as you can get on World Health. We withdrew our money. We told them we're getting out. Doesn't mean that someday we won't go back in. Maybe we will when it's correctly run, but they made a lot of bad predictions, and they said a lot of bad things about what to do and how to do it, and they turned out to be wrong. And they were really a puppet of China. And make no mistake, we hold China fully responsible for concealing the virus and unleashing it upon the world. They could have stopped it. They should have stopped it. Would have been very easy to do at the source when it happened. In contrast, Joe Biden's entire career has been a gift to the Chinese Communist Party and to the calamity of errors that they've made. They made so many errors, and it's been devastating for the American worker. China has taken out hundreds of billions of dollars a year from our country, and we rebuilt China. I give them all the credit in the world. I don't give the credit for the people that used to stand here because they allowed this to happen where hundreds of billions of dollars were taken out of the United States Treasury in order to rebuild China. There's no company and no country in the world has ever ripped off the United States like the incredible job that they did on this country and the people that ran it. Possibly it's one of the reasons, certainly it's one of the very big reasons, trade and things related to trade, that I got elected in the first place. I've been talking about it for a long time, along with many other subjects, frankly. Joe Biden supported China's entry into the World Trade Organization, one of the greatest geopolitical and economic disasters in world history. If you look at China, you look at the moment they joined the World Trade, they were flatlining for years and years and years and decades. And then all of a sudden they joined the World Trade Organization and they went like a rocket ship. They were given all sorts of advantages. They were considered a developing country. As a developing country, they got tremendous advantages over the United States and other countries. And they took advantage of those advantages and then some. Biden personally led the effort to give China permanent most favored nation status, which is a tremendous advantage for a country to have. Few countries have it, but the United States doesn't have it. Never did, probably never even asked for it, because they didn't know what they were doing. As Vice President, Biden was a leading advocate of the Paris Climate Accord, which was unbelievably expensive to our country, would have crushed American manufacturers while allowing China to pollute the atmosphere with impunity. Yet one more gift from Biden to the Chinese Communist Party. They took all of the advantage away from us. They took everything away. They don't have oil. We would have had to close up tremendous amounts of our energy to qualify eventually, not too far into the future. We would have had to do things that would have been unbelievably destructive to our country, including the possible closing of 25% of our businesses. Think of that. And it was going to cost us hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for the privilege of being involved in the Paris Climate Accord. And you just have to look at what took place this year in Paris and France, where money was being sent to countries all over the world, and the people of France didn't want to take it, and they didn't, and they did a lot of rioting. They had their taxes raised. We would have had to raise our taxes, and it was a disaster. I've been given a lot of credit for what I did there. It took a certain amount of courage, I guess, because it sounds so nice, the Paris Climate Accord, but it wasn't good for us at all. America lost nearly 10,000 factories while Joe Biden was vice president. Think of that, 10,000 factories. He wrote something today, and he made a statement today that I wrote down, pretty accurate. So Biden was here for 47 years, 8 years, the last 8 years, not long ago, as vice president. He said, 1 in 5 miles of our highways are still in poor condition. Well, we're doing a good job on highways, but why didn't he fix them 3 years ago? Why didn't he fix them? Tens of thousands of bridges are in disrepair and on the verge of collapse. Well, it's probably not a right number, but we have bridges that should have been fixed. Why didn't he fix them? He was there for 8 years with President Obama. Why didn't they fix them? Tens of thousands of bridges. This is what he wrote. High-speed broadband. We want high-speed broadband. Well, why didn't he get it? 3 years ago is not a long time. And he didn't do any of the things, but now he says he's going to be president. And as president, he's going to do all the things that he didn't do. He never did anything except make very bad decisions, especially on foreign policy. So Joe Biden and President Obama freely allowed China to pillage our factories, plunder our communities, and steal our most precious secrets. And I've stopped it largely, but I've stopped it. And it wasn't easy. because you talk about a certain power of the telephone and the calls where they would call and say, no, we don't want to do that. And other countries would call on behalf of China, but I did it. I did what has to be done. And you just take a look at what's gone on and take a look at at the numbers where they devalued their currency in order to pay the tariffs. Now the Democrat Party is calling for defunding of our military. Think of that, defunding. They want to defund our military when China is building a massive military. They're building a massive military, and Biden wants to defund our military. And the world needs American strength right now more than ever, and we've got it. We've got now, soon, as all this equipment comes in, all made in the USA, we've got the newest, most incredible weapons anywhere in the world. We have the best tanks, the best ships, the best missiles, rockets. We have the best of everything. We have the best fighter jets, the F-35, the F-18. All of these assets are being built. Tankers, incredible tankers, bombers. Hope we don't have to use them. But we have the most incredible military. When I came in, the military was totally depleted. It was at a level that was just absolutely incredible. You know the statements. I made the statements before. I told you what generals told me about our military. And I'll make them again. If somebody needs them, we'll give them to you. Very well documented. As vice president, Biden opposed tariffs, and he was standing up for China. He didn't want to do anything to disrupt the relationship with China, even though China was taking us to the cleaners. He opposed my very strict travel ban on Chinese nationals to stop the spread of the China virus. He was totally against it. Xenophobic, he called me. Xenophobic. A month later, he admitted I was right. We would have had thousands of people additionally die if we let people come in from heavily infected China. But we stopped it. We did a travel ban in January. Nancy Pelosi was dancing in the streets of Chinatown in San Francisco a month later, and even later than that. And others, too. They all thought what I did was a terrible mistake. We would have lost, in fact, Dr. Fauci said he would have lost thousands of additional people if President Trump had to do that. And I was a crowd of one, because even experts didn't want to do it. They thought it was a mistake. And then I did Europe when I started seeing what was going on in Italy and Spain and France and other countries in Europe. I did a ban on people coming in from Europe. That would have been disastrous for our country also. And we saved tens of thousands of lives, but we actually saved millions of lives by closing up. We saved millions, potentially millions of lives. Could be a number that we're actually working on, but it could be 2 to 3 million lives. So we're at 135,000, which is terrible. One is too much. But we would have had millions of people dead from this curse that came at us. But we did what we had to do.
And we've been listening to the President of the United States in the Rose Garden, where he is using the White House to deliver a campaign speech, an attack against his rival, Joe Biden, who, according to several independent polls, is now beating him in a number of red or Republican states. Want to give you an update, though, on some breaking news that we have just learned. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we have learned, has been admitted to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore for a possible infection. We are told that she is resting comfortably, that she is going to stay in the hospital for the next few days to receive intravenous antibiotic treatment. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 87 years old. She has survived cancer 4 times, and we are just learning that the Supreme Court justice is hospitalized tonight. We're going to have much more on our 24-hour streaming network, CBSN. You can watch it at cbsnews.com or on our CBS News app. There will be more to come on your local news and on this CBS station. And we're going to have a full wrap-up tonight on the CBS Evening News. There's a lot of news to get to tonight, and we'll have all of it. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Norah O'Donnell, CBS News, Washington.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.